Welcome to today's masterclass. My name is Jose Rivera, and I will be your host today. On the off chance that you don't know about CSIA, we are a global, non-profit trade association with over 500 members in 35 countries. For control system integrator members, the CSIA Best Practices Manual and CSIA certification are some of the more popular member benefits, but you will also enjoy a variety of others, including professional development, learning from your peers, and access to professional services experts, including insurance, financial, and legal, who understand the system integrator's unique business needs. For partner members, CSIA offers an ecosystem to grow your SI programs, understand your customer pain points, monitor industry trends, and share your thought leadership. With thousands of qualified integrators and suppliers, the CSIA Industrial Automation Exchange helps system integrators, industry suppliers, and manufacturers connect and do business. For SIs and partners, it provides a platform to support your content and search engine optimization marketing efforts, position yourself as a thought leader, and nurture prospects during their complicated buyer's journey. In case you aren't a current member, now is a great time to join. Membership provides you many benefits, including a full lineup of virtual events and other resources for you and your entire team, from accounting to sales to operations, 365 days a year. Plus, CSIA dues are prorated, which means that if you join now, dues are half off because we are midway throughout the year, offering you a great value and way to give CSIA membership a try. During the following virtual event, please use the chat function for chatting, but also use the Q&A box to place the questions for the presenters. And at this point, I would like to turn it over to today's speakers, Don Roberts and Jack Barber. Gentlemen.
Thanks, Jose. Appreciate that. Let me share my slide there. Anyways, appreciate the opportunity to share some of our thoughts and insights with respect to the CSI community and the best practices. This is really a continuation of the virtual event series that we were asked to do last year to help the community implement best practices. This session in particular is going to focus on the people component of our businesses, which is, I'll say, become increasingly important as SIs in our community struggle to recruit and retain talent in the current environment. During this session, we'll focus not only on HR protocols that are specified in the best practices, but really how to take advantage of your company's most valuable resource, your people. So I guess maybe back up, Don, maybe we should give a quick introduction to Exotek. I figure most people in the community probably know us by now, but we're a management consulting firm that focuses exclusively on system integrators in this industry, the automation industry. That's our background. That's where all of our clients are in this space, and that's where we focus on really what does it take to help our clients be successful in system integration in the automation industry. Don?
Yeah, Jack, I was just looking at the list of people that are so far signed in, and to build a little bit on what Jose was saying, very much an international group. I see people from Italy and Croatia, so Europe is well represented here, and obviously North America. I think this is a great topic that we've got here, particularly on the heels of the CSIA conference, the future of work, right? And there were some great presentations. I particularly like, a couple of my takeaways were like Heather Haas in the first day, and that I feel I need, that learning how to communicate with people at the various levels in the organization, I think was a great presentation. And then, John Sullivan from DMC, I mean, he just does a good job, but just his presentation on leadership development and the way in which they kind of theme that around Star Trek, right? So ways in which you engage your employees as growth and development of people. It should be a fun thing, right? So I think those are a couple of great takeaways from the conference.
Awesome. Well, I know one of the things we like to do is kind of get idea of the size of the companies represented in today's session, so that we can kind of tailor some of our comments. So Jennifer, if you don't mind, could you put up that poll about people's size of companies? And if you guys in the audience wouldn't mind just quickly letting us know kind of what size of company that you're representing, then we can consider that in how we phrase our discussion. Give a couple seconds for that. Don, I also appreciated the CSIA conference. First time I was able to get back to that for several years, and just back in an environment where people are willing to share ideas on how to run their business successfully, both the good and the bad. Here's things that we've tried that work, and then one of the popular sessions of the conference, I don't know, is always the hot stove, which is a little bit of the other side of it. It was, man, ouch, that hurt. But you can learn lessons from people, of things that didn't work, and hopefully not burn yourself on that hot stove.
Yeah, I was having a mentoring call with one of our clients here this morning, and it was their third time at the conference, but they hadn't been there that much, and they just kind of reiterated how it was very interesting to be able to talk to people with similar issues, and they're very open about sharing their challenges or how they solve problems and things of that nature. And this guy was in particular, he's project management oriented, and he was talking about the role of the project manager and project admins and things like that, so they could really dig in pretty deep into what skill sets are necessary.
Yeah, I know when I came to the CSIA for the first time in the late 1990s, was just really impressed with the association and the people that were present there, so open and willing to share ideas. But ostensibly they're competitors. They may not be in the direct geography or whatnot, so it didn't seem like they were giving away trade secrets, so to speak. But just their willingness to share both things that they felt were really working in their organization. As like I said, the challenges can also benefit others. All right, hopefully we've given enough time for people to respond to that. Jennifer, can you kind of let us know what the results of that were? All right, looks like a good diversity there, Don. So of the people that responded, got representations, and maybe not the 1 to 10 range, but pretty much everything else. So it looks like we're going to have to keep our comments broad, in the sense that we'll try to address it. And if we feel like there's something that we haven't hit on for your company in particular, then ask clarifying questions. We're happy to do that. Which kind of, I'll transition to our next slide here. Just kind of before we dive in, just to set some expectations. These sessions that we're doing on best practices, we don't really consider a webinar. We haven't created a lot of slides and crammed them in as it's some sort of canned presentation. We're really kind of here as, okay, infamously known as CSIA auditors. Here are our thoughts and ideas about best practices and potentially what an auditor might be looking for. But we really want to solicit that the feedback from you guys. What is it that you're interested in, whether it's related to the audit specifically or not. Just those sort of people challenges that you're having. In our peer groups, we one of the favorite parts of the session is what we call I Wish I Knew, where folks just kind of throw out, hey, here's something that I've encountered recently, wondering whether or not anybody else in the group is, what you guys are, have you seen this, what are you doing about it or whatnot. So kind of think about it in that spirit, which is it doesn't have to be super prompted or whatnot. Just if you feel like you have something that comes up in your mind, put it in the chat session, and Don will be keeping an eye on that. We'll either answer it at that point in the presentation, or there will be ample time for Q&A at the end. So we'll cover it off there.
Yeah, Jack, and just want to reiterate on that. Don't wait till the end to ask your questions. As we're going through this, we've got very few slides to go through, so to keep it interactive, and I am keeping an eye on both the chat and the Q&A session. So anytime you have a question, just pop it in there. And some of you that have been in some of my meetings know that if I get the sense that you're being too shy, I'm gonna call you out and ask you to ask that question too. So.
All right, well, let's get started. Thought we'd just start by, common system integration challenges that we're hearing from our clients and the community. Probably these are hitting on pain points for yourself, so don't want to belabor it, but really in my mind, they kind of fall into two different categories. There's kind of some challenges that come forward from kind of the changing workforce demands. How are we as a community addressing increased demand for hybrid and remote work? Kind of certainly during and through the COVID pandemic, and not to suggest maybe we're out of it, but certainly we've gotten used to it at this point. So what is that outcome? How are we addressing that with our current employees, and it's certainly coming up with as recruiting and whatnot, those questions about what is this job going to look like from a ability to work in a remote environment or hybrid environment. Increasing competition, including outside our industry. I think that's one of the things that we've seen uniquely in the last year is that we are seeing people from outside, not necessarily even interested in maybe the controls background of an engineer or whatnot. They just are looking at good skilled people, good professionals to bring in to whatever it is that they do for that particular company. That doesn't necessarily have to be a controls job. So in some sense, it seems like both our employees potentially can search further afield, and we certainly have seen more predatory resource practices from outside of our industry reaching in. A couple other factors listed there is, and this is something, Don, we've seen for quite a time. It just seems like there is an aging in the expertise and leadership within the controls space. So there's this kind of need amongst many in the community to, folks looking to retire, looking to transition their responsibilities, to have more bandwidth and whatnot, is what are we doing to bring up that younger leadership in the organization to assume the responsibilities. And last but not least on this side of the equation is, I certainly have heard this from our clients as we've moved to more remote work, is how do you attract and onboard and train younger resources, particularly engineers that kind of need that mentoring, they need that oversight. And if we've disrupted this workspace and don't have our engineers necessarily working shoulder to shoulder on a day-to-day basis, how can you, bring the younger engineers in and have them not struggle and not spin their wheels because they just aren't getting the senior oversight to make sure that they're staying on track.
Yeah, that interaction between those last two bullets is an important one, right? Because like you say, the aging expertise. So now I want these guys working on the in the projects and getting the projects out, but they don't have time to train the young guys. And so we're seeing a lot of programs start to roll out in the integrators, things like obligation to learn and obligation to teach, right? So that balanced side of that, we'll hit a couple times, I think, on the whole leadership issue where we're so busy working on projects that we're not really spending enough time to do the leadership development. And I know I'll hit on that a little bit later on too.
Right. And then the other half of this equation is, of course, the resources themselves, the people that we are trying to attract and motivate to help us accomplish what we're out to with our organizations for our clients. So that, put a couple down there, certainly there's a demand for higher wages, maybe do the attractive alternatives because as we previously described, there's more people out there in seeking their services. And then there's, legitimate, whether it's wage, inflation, whatever, there's their own personal pressures that they really are seeing need to maximize not only their satisfaction in their work, but their compensation for their work so that they can deal with the economic situations that are upon us. Kind of balance that. And the second one I think is almost as important, if not more important, as the wages is there's just an increased demand on behalf of the folks that are working for us that they want to know that they're valued and that we're investing in them as valuable resources. They just coming to work for an engineer and being technically challenged may not be sufficient anymore. Whether, assuming they have some aspirations from a career perspective, whether that's from a leadership perspective, from a people thing, or a leadership perspective from a, technical perspective, they want to see how am I within this organization going to be able to grow myself. And maybe that's always been there, Don, but it just seems to be increasingly present now in our community.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's definitely increasingly important to them. They want to be able to draw that path of the future for them, and that path isn't just I'm going to work harder every day. It's going to be I'm going to have some change and some development and some growth and all of that sort of stuff. I think the other thing that is coming out pretty strong is, oh, and this is going to be my impact on the community or on society, right? So we're hearing more of the younger people come in and want to see that value alignment with the company and see the, sort of their impact on the world as well. Those are kind of new.
Yeah, absolutely. And ties a little bit to the last bullet about the work-life balance, which isn't always directly equated to the I want to work X number of hours and have the rest for my own life. It's more the full 360 view of it, as Don is suggesting, is how is my work making a difference? Not just within the company itself, but how as a company are we making a difference in the world? What are we doing to make things better? So I think there's an additional call upon us as leadership in our community and within our organizations to be able to communicate that to our people in a way that they get it and they value working within our company because they know that company is making a difference as opposed to going to another company or a company outside our industry.
Yeah, and Jack, you kind of overlay that on top of the chart that we have down below, which is from Easy Stats, right? And the big green bar at the top there is what percentage of the companies have no additional capacity. We're already working, swamped, right? And so this whole work-life balance in an environment where we've got more work than we can ever do, how are we going to be able to maintain that balance? And then, I'll paint on top of that. I was recently reading a ISM report on business, Purchasing Managers Index, and trying to get a sense from them as to what they see as being the future for particularly manufacturing and of course the automation side of that. And I'll just read the quote. There's from a comment on Bloomberg. It was, there's no indication on the manufacturing side that a recession is looming. Business is going to be booming for a long time. They're still struggling to get people on the factory floor. If there were worries about a recession, you'd see comments about hiring freezes and stuff like that. In the manufacturing environment, we're not seeing any of that. So I know there's a lot of talk about recession and the consumer-driven recession. I don't think that's going to touch us. So this work-life balance, this impact on employees, this maybe even the other side of that is, am I going to have a job? I think being able to communicate to the employees a lot about future's good. Stick with us. Stay with us.
All right. So as we said, part of this discussion or whatnot is really as auditors looking at the best practices. touching upon some of the things that come up in the HR management section, and hopefully Don will be able to tie this back to, how it applies to, overcoming some of those challenges that we just talked about. But if you've picked up the best practices, you've looked at this section, the primary bullets there are kind of the subsections within chapter 2, the HR management section. So we're not going to go through every single question in detail, but just based on our experience in audits and with our clients, here are some of the things insights that we have, things that you may want to consider about as you're looking through these. Let's start in the administration section, Don. We won't get wrapped around the axle with a lot of HR protocols, but I know as we lead into this section, we usually start with the organizational chart itself. How have you defined the roles within your organization, and how are those communicated to the staff, not only as it exists today, but as the organizational chart evolves. So some insights or things that we put out for you to consider this is, when I look at an organizational chart, one of the fun things I first quickly look for is the organizational chart defined by the roles within the organization or by the people in the organization, and tend to favor the former, which is lay out an organizational chart based on, here are the different functions within the organization, here are the different roles needed to fill that function, and then go in and add whose names go by each one. And you may find, in fact, that you have the same person's name in multiple spots, which for a growing organization as a financer is this person is currently doing more than one function. But if you go that path, then you set yourself up to say, okay, eventually we may split this responsibilities into these two functions and hire somebody that's optimized for each particular role.
Yeah, and particularly the smaller size companies where people are not specialized so much. Like I'm a project manager, I'm a technical lead, I'm a coder on a project. I think it's important to be able to define those roles. And I think of it a little bit, Jack, a little bit like on Traction, where they talk about an accountability chart as opposed to an org chart, right? I think it's very valuable if you can. There are a few areas like project management and technical lead where those are probably, for the most part, roles until you get much larger and they become specific jobs.
Yeah. The second thing, and I know this is something we've been emphasizing with our clients recently, Don, is don't stop at your current organizational chart. Put together an organizational chart of what you anticipate the needs for the organization are 3 years from now or 5 years from now, however far you want to look out. It's a very valuable exercise, if nothing else, in really disrupting your thinking about, who we are today based on the people we have today versus where we want to be 3 years from now. And it also starts tying in down to that leadership development, which is, okay, we realize that 3 years from now, our organization is likely going to look like this. Which leaders do we need to be investing in to make sure that we can get there, or where should we be looking for new leadership so that we're, we're growing into what we want to become as a company.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at a 20% compounded aggregate growth over 4 years, you're doubling the company, right? And so it sneaks up on you if you don't take a look at it. And 20% growth in today's environment, I mean, is if you can get the people, it's pretty easy.
And I said we wouldn't spend a lot of time on specific policies and protocols, but I know one that kind of trips people up sometimes that we look at as auditors is the drug and alcohol policy. And I would say that is even one that is evolving over time. I know kind of 5 years ago, primarily you were just looking at whether or not their alcohol policy, drug and alcohol policy, talked about whether it was limited to just whether you were using it while you were in the office versus the distinction of anytime you're at work. But I have seen more evolved practices over time in this area. I see much more emphasis around identification and treatment rather than just, just, I don't know if it's the carrot or the stick, but, just the stick part of, what we're going to do if you do something wrong, but, really we're there to help you if you find yourself in a situation. So I think that that's a good practice to consider if that's not something you're currently addressing. It speaks to your investment in people, both when they're being successful as well as when they're struggling.
Yeah, and one of the things I see is this concept of drug and alcohol is a very old concept, and now really, I mean, we just came from Colorado. Cannabis is legal. A lot of places in the world where cannabis is legal, and so if my policy is drug and alcohol, well, there's this whole other category that's similar to alcohol now, but it's not alcohol, and so is my policy actually missing that? Because under drugs, I call it illegal drugs, right? And I think
then there's prescription drug use too, and whether or not you've accounted for that, and what people have challenges in which they need to have prescription drugs, and just having a clear policy about, okay, that's fine. Here's how you need to operate if that's the case. So anyways, I just see more evolved practices moving forward on this area as well. Another kind of corner case, Don, and this is kind of the Wild West on this is now with remote work, what does it mean to when you're at work and when you're not work? And, these sorts of policies need to be revisited, and the remote work situation of, does this really still apply in a remote work situation?
Yeah, expand that just a little bit further into international. So there's a lot, this is a global environment that we're working in, and there's a lot of companies that, maybe your country has a policy that is X, like I can't test for drugs, but I'm going to send somebody off to work in the US where drug testing is pretty common, right? So when you're putting your policy together, you need to start to take into consideration what market space are you going to be playing in.
All right, so that's some thoughts in the administration area under recruiting and selecting people to join your organization. This is one I still see trip people up on the interviewing process. There still seems to be an underappreciation of those people that are involved in interviewing, which commonly involved, I don't mean to pick on engineers, but commonly involved, you bring somebody in and you want to see if they're technically competent. So you're bringing engineers into that interview process to do that, and whether or not they've been trained, particularly in kind of the questions that you can and can't ask, and how you can and can't ask things. Really all the folks that are involved and going to be coming in contact with your interviewees really should have some formal training in this area of knowing what to ask and how to ask it, and what not to ask and how to not ask it.
Yeah.
And then Don, the onboarding, I'll turn that to you. What do you see that this is something that's being more progressively addressed? There's hopefully gone are the days of somebody shows up in their cube and just kind of starts spending for themselves.
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, so this is an area where a lot of our clients are actually tracking the time from when the employee first comes on board until when they're paying their own way, right? And how do they shorten that down? So there's a ton of stuff going on here. There's a couple of really good integration companies that basically employee comes on board and they just put them through a very rigorous multi-week training program and to just shorten that cycle right down. So everybody then comes out of that training program all using the same methodologies, communicating in the same fashion. So lots of stuff going on there. I mean, there's certainly the simple checklist. Did I go through the checklist and make sure that all of the legality is covered off? But the amount of time that I can shorten from when they first come on board to when they're productive is absolutely critical time. A lot of that time is doubled up, right? So if you're training, you're actually taking one of your highly billable people to train this individual. The other thing we're seeing on the onboarding is more of like fleet onboarding, where people will hire on 5 or 6 at a time, so that then they can just get that training intensified a little bit. They'll have a class of 5 that they're going through, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and it's another area where accounting for the remote possibilities, how does this training map on to, or onboarding map on if it needs to be done remotely? Kind of thinking through that and making sure that's as effective as possible. The other thing I would share is, consider that training is not a one-way street. Necessarily, and onboarding is not necessarily a one-way street. There can be shared responsibility with the person that's being onboarded. So you could come up with an onboarding program that has some responsibility on the managers, and then it's actually useful to think of some of it as kind of directing the person that's being onboarded. Hey, within your first 6 weeks, schedule a meeting with so-and-so to get this sort of information. It can be even just the president of the company to understand better about the kind of purpose of the company and kind of how that has an impact on the world and the community. Things like that can be kind of a shared checklist, right? And some are responsibilities of the onboarded employee to go out and make that happen for themselves, but directed in a way that's not just left, to their own devices. All right, skipping on down, the next section on the best practices has to do with performance management. This is historically tied to just looking at reviews. Do you do reviews or not? Is there a standard template for reviews? All of which are good practices. I'm not dissing that or whatnot, but if I'd say kind of trends or whatnot, the more people I talk to, they're not necessarily just restraining that to just an annual review. It's more of a, hey, what are we doing to engage our employees throughout the year to make sure that they have goals, that they understand them, that they're working towards them, that if they're getting stuck, how as a manager am I helping them move, get unstuck and move forward. It's more of an iterative process than a once a year you scratch out a performance review and then it kind of sits there forgotten until the next time.
Yeah, I think one of the key things is the younger generation just needs that feedback. They're accustomed to that feedback. So making sure that your performance review process is taking that into consideration. So that may be monthly, that may be, quarterly at the most, but they certainly do want that feedback. Yeah.
I remember there's during my days at my former company, they had on the weekly or bi-weekly, whatever you have as your check-in with your direct reports, they'd have a 10-10-10 strategy. And the first 10 was kind of, hey, what you're working on, how it's going. I have to go back and look at the second 10 one, but I know the third 10 was, hey, how are you doing on your goals? Providing, affirmations where they were making progress, and then if they were struggling, going, hey, how can I help you overcome that so we can move forward on these goals? So always keeping that in front of them so that they know that these goals that were set up in their performance reviews are real and that you care about them, not just the goals, but the people being able to achieve the goals. Again, just small ways to show that you're a people-oriented organization. All right, Don, what about training and professional development? That's kind of de-emphasized. It's not really important anymore, right? We just give up.
No, just throw them off the end of the dock, see if they can swim. This particular one is one that does give people a lot of trouble during the audit, at least, and it's because it's tended to be in the past very ad hoc, and what the best practices recommends is it to be a little bit more structured. We talked really early on in the call here about people wanting to have a career path. So how does your training and professional development program fit into that career pathing? So one of the things I see people missing a lot when we get to these questions is they just jump right into the best practices, right into, say, section 2.4.10, right? And read what the requirements are. But I always recommend go back to the start of that section, so section 2.4, because there's a lot of good guidance around what a program might look like. So for instance, a good well-structured training program would include, these are the skills that you need to have. This is how I'm going to get those skills. and this is how I'm going to demonstrate that I have those skills, right? So those are the sorts of things that as auditors we're looking for, but those are the sorts of things that are foundational to any good development, training and development program. And some integrators just do a fantastic job at this. I think the other thing we see quite a bit is the soft skills is an area where people skip over that a lot. We've always heard that engineers come out of school with fairly good technical skills. Maybe they need some touch up in some areas. Their soft skills suck. And so, trying to get some of those soft skills in place. And a lot of times I'm pointing people to keep an eye on what Microsoft is doing. So Microsoft Viva Learning, which is part of the Teams environment. There's some good stuff coming out of there. Microsoft's relationship with LinkedIn and, access to, I think what they have, like something like 10,000 different training programs that are available. And other areas like Udemy and things of that nature. So there's good support that you don't have to build it all your own, but it's something that is critical for the new hires and even for the more senior people.
Yeah. And I think by leveraging some of the things like Don, you're saying, Viva, there's some ways to kind of fill out and beef up your training offering to your employees. And as some of the challenges we alluded to, right now, I just see that this is an area where you need to be consciously investing. We need to be consciously investing and showing our employees that when they come here, or even if they've been here for a while, there are ways for them to continue to advance themselves, or somebody's going to offer it to them if you don't. So it's an area that I don't think should be missed. In areas that shouldn't be missed on compensation benefits, currently I don't believe there is a audit question in this section, but it's probably an area in which there maybe perhaps should be, but it's certainly coming up more as the workforce environment is changing. Certainly getting more questions from our clients on how do they make sure that their pay scale stay competitive.
Hey, Jack, there's a question in the Q&A about what keeps me up at night. Retention, especially when clients are poaching our talent. And I can absolutely hearing the same thing across the board. And a couple of things there. One of them gets back to this sort of career path training and development. If I don't see a career path and that's not communicated to me on a very regular basis, then I'm probably going to jump ship. The guy that's trying to recruit me away, he's offering me a title change and certain compensation changes and stuff like that. I will say, and this doesn't make it the retention side any easier, but I'll say that from a recruiting perspective, the boomerangs has been the most productive recruiting. So employees are getting poached by a plant or poached by another integrator or whatever, but the grass is not as green as they thought. And so we're seeing a lot of people that are yanked away from your company actually coming back within 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. So a lot of integrators actually have a mechanism to maintain communications with those people that have that. Yeah. Like ideally, you don't want them to leave, but if they do, that doesn't mean they're going.
Yeah. And faced with that reality is don't burn that bridge as they head out the door. Then have some communication path with them, and then some of them, actually have as part of their recruiting program is a rehire program. So they have a methodical way to say, okay, 1 year out from when this employee left, we're going to reach back out and see if the grass is actually greener. So all good practices in this area. Don, just looking at the clock, we probably should move on. Employee communications, we can probably hit relatively quickly. This kind of has two aspects, at least from an audit perspective. There's kind of how the management's messages are being communicated, cascaded down into the organization. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think this just gets back to as companies grow, what you find is your communications requirements grow as well. Being able to communicate down through the organization. So your town halls and things of that nature are pretty important. I think it's key for the employees to understand, here's what the overall goals of the company are. Here's how we're performing against the goals. And here's your role in meeting those goals as well, right? I think those are important messages to get out there. I just find you can't over communicate.
Yeah. I think some fall into the trap of, okay, we did our strategic planning meeting, we had our town meeting to kick off things in January, and that's it. It's not that our employees are dense, but it does help to reinforce that message. And I think ideally, as Don has suggested, it's great if you kind of stitch some of these things together, the performance reviews and whatnot. How are the goals that you are setting for them stitched into the goals of the company itself? And so they can see how they become part of that, not only achieving kind of the financial metrics of the organization, but in helping in this way, I'm helping the organization make a difference in the community in this way. The better you can do that, the more from that retention perspective, that you increase your chances that they will feel part of something that they by being involved in, they can make a difference in, and increases the likelihood that they'll stay. Don, the second one in this area is how to hold effective meetings. It's one I always try to hold a straight face on as an auditor, but just the mechanics of being able to have effective meetings.
Yeah, it's a question that I think there's a whole lot of more important questions that should be asked, but also if the effectiveness of your meetings is critical, right? So this is one that's actually not that difficult. We start every one of our meetings with what are your expectations? We end every one of our meetings with benefits and concerns and things of that nature, right? And being able to get that in place, standardized agenda for project kickoff meetings and all of those sorts of things. This one's easy enough to actually implement, but I don't see it being done quite as much.
Yeah. Okay. I know there are some other things that we want to hit on beyond this kind of best practices. So, just to round this out from the health, wellness, and safety, we're not suggesting those things aren't important. Certainly from communicating to your employees that you care about them, focusing in these areas, there's some good advice there in the best practices as well. From the ongoing safety training, I'd probably say the thing that I see missed the most is they may have accounted for, yes, we do safety training for kind of safety within our walls, but they may miss, we have a way to identify their safety training on the client side, and that we're sure and have a track record that our employees have a way to know that that's the case and be able to track that they've been trained for whatever the requirements are for the clients as well. So don't miss that step as well. And then on
especially that tracking component of it, Jack. So if somebody is getting safety training at the client site, just make a record of it, keep a record of it, so that you just from a liability in the company side perspective, you can say, look, the guy was trained. So
yeah. And then I do get questions on the last one about doing in-house inspections and audits. My advice on that one is just designate somebody to be the safety officer at each of your locations where you have, brick and mortar. Doesn't even have to be the manager in the organization. It could be somebody that's a real detailed-oriented person that would be, see that as a responsibility that they would take pride in and make them accountable for that. And, often they do a great job of doing periodic safety checks and just make sure that you're keeping your employees as safe as possible. All right, let's move on. A couple of things we just wanted to touch on. We did a webinar, I don't know, Don, last month or two. I think it was back in May, but we kind of took this idea of, organizational stages and how they grow over time, and kind of looked at that through the lens of the people component. And what do organizations look like at various levels, starting from kind of what we often refer to as the entrepreneurial startup, or the original seller doer model, where somebody, typically technical entrepreneurs, will start a system integration organization based around their expertise and start hiring engineers to do the project work as they're able to bring it in. And kind of what are the things that you should be thinking about if you're in this mode, on up through what we affectionately call the engineering playground, which is, okay, your organization's growing, you're starting to kind of define roles within the organization, but it's still, you're relying on kind of technical savvy and just hustle to get projects done. Kind of as illustrated there, it's typically the names come first rather than the roles. And then flipping that over and getting to, kind of your first true organizational structure, where roles have been formally defined based on that function and that set of responsibilities rather than the people occupying them. On up through, as your organization grows and you start subdividing into business units, what that looks like and some of the challenges there. And then we touch a little bit on kind of, as you grow, say beyond system integration, where you have aspects of your business that may be more product oriented or other services oriented, and kind of what that looks like. I'll put the link there up or you can go to our website if that's something that you're interested in. We touch upon some of the things we've talked about here, but more kind of those things that are likely important based on kind of where you are in the maturation of your organization from a people perspective.
Jack, I really like the layout of this slide, because there's what we've noticed is there's a fairly big distinction from that top row to the second row. It seems that as the companies are growing, when you transition from that top row to the bottom row, you start to find out that the company now has the potential, or the company is growing faster than the actual people can. So if you haven't invested pretty heavily in the people during that top row development of the company, when you get to that second row, you're going to find out that, well, it's almost like you're pulling the people into the growth, right? They're almost hesitant about it. Up until that point, they're pushing grow. And you also start to realize that a lot of the development that maybe I did do on the top row was all around job specific, right? So it's how to, hard skills. We were talking about the training, a little bit about hard skills of how to do it. And when you get to that second row, I want to have somebody to run this business unit. This BU1 in the second row is about the same size as maybe the the one box above in the middle, or maybe even the box on the right hand side, right? And so where's that leader, right? Did I take the time to develop that leader? And so companies start to realize that not enough attention was spent on that leadership development. And I think John Sullivan did a great job of this in his presentation at CSIA, the distinction between leadership and management. So yeah, maybe there's a BU manager, but there's a lot of other leadership skills that are necessary in order to really be able to function well at that business unit or beyond system integration level, right? The ability to communicate and train other people in the organization. You may not be the manager, but your job is to learn and teach others and the leadership skills necessary for it. So yeah, that's a huge transition for sure.
Yeah. Leads right into the kind of other and last point we make before we open it up to questions is, we often get asked, well, what is the kind of essential elements? What do I need in a leadership development program or a people development program? Anyways, this is our kind of thoughts on it. We believe that personal awareness is a fundamental component for being a good leader. It's good for career development and whatnot, is just to give your folks, an assessment it even came up in the CSI conference down. The person that was up there talking about was like the data analytics behind kind of their personality, what they do, why they do it, that sort of thing. Not only for themselves to be able to better understand, hey, this is really my strength and I should lean into this, or this is an area where I'm challenged and how I can overcome it, but also then how that plays with other folks within the organization. Certainly by the time that you're looking at somebody to become a leader, is they need a healthy recognition of kind of what works for them, as well as that may not map on exactly to all their employees or direct reports. And so what do you do about that? How can you move your organization ahead successfully, given that there are statistical differences, data analytics that are different from person to person? So that's one thing that you should think about. There's various programs and ways to do that. Won't go into those right now, but if you need more information, we can help you with that. Professional training is probably the thing that people most think about when they consider, oh, I need to make sure that they have the right training, particularly for engineers on this platform or that platform. But really, as somewhat we alluded to before, is two aspects. One is the soft skills aspect of their training and development, how they can get that, and think about the hard skills not only for engineers but for other aspects of your organization. What hard skills do your finance people need? What hard skills do your HR people need? Have you defined that? Do they have a way to be able to develop themselves in their respective areas?
Yeah, on that topic of professional training, I was think back to the Albert Einstein quote of the problems of today cannot be solved with the same level of thinking that created them, right? So you need, there's a lot of internal training that can happen, but you probably need to start to look outside the organization as well.
Moving on, not necessarily that's solely a progression, but certainly coaching and mentoring is coming up more, Don, in these areas, and being more formalized, and showing your staff that you have ways for them to have access to coaching and mentoring. And I draw the distinction between that's not necessarily their boss. In some sense, it probably shouldn't be their boss. It's some resource they have to go and help them sort out things, work on themselves, develop them things that they don't feel like they're necessarily having to interact with their manager to do that. So that would be something to disrupt your thinking about if you're formalizing what you're doing from a coaching and mentoring perspective. Next on our list, and this seems to be more in vogue. I don't know why it wasn't before, but I think COVID disrupted people's notion that they knew everything they needed to know. But also looking at people development from their ability to network with their peers, not just within your organization, but outside your organization, getting outside themselves, getting outside yourselves, meaning your organization, and having opportunity to kind of vet, here are ideas, here are things that we're doing, as well as soliciting input, hey, lessons learned, hey, what are you guys trying, what works, what doesn't, having it be certainly for your leaders, if not your entire organization, that you support their involvement in interacting with their peers, and networking is a way to show that you're investing in them.
Yeah, that whole external, if you will, external mentoring is becoming really, really popular. It's a big thing, whether that's through Vistage or peer groups or one-to-one mentoring or whatever. We're seeing. I know I'm spending a lot of my time on it, and we're seeing a lot of interest in that area.
Right. And then Don mentioned this, so I won't belabor it much more. Is career aspirations as part of people development, is let them know that there are ways to evolve their career within the organization, whether get from them what are their visions, what are their goals for themselves, and how you can support that through their development within your organization. All right, let's move on then, Don, and just kind of open it up for questions, either in the people component, or how your plans feed into people, or how your processes support people. Questions that we have in the audience.
Yeah, and on top of the questions, I think also, if you can, just kind of into the Q&A or the chat. Just type in what's your key takeaway here. What was your aha when you walked away from this? If you could each do that, that would be great. It helps us tailor where your interests are and things of that nature. So.
So
And
Don,
don't forget, I could see your names, so I might just call on you too. Who was that, Jack? Sorry.
just in the, since retention came up, one thing that we haven't had much of an opportunity to talk about is there's the old maxim about culture trumps strategy.
Yeah.
So we've talked a lot about tying their goals into the company goals and letting them be able to see it that perspective. But, thoughts about your company culture and how that can help in the people component of your business.
Absolutely, and I touched a little bit on that earlier. One of the sort of, I'm going to say it's a bit of a surprise for me, is just how powerful the message is when your company is providing value to society as a whole, right? Particularly with the sort of younger generations, that's critically important. But yeah, so we're seeing culture have to shift a little bit to get aligned a little bit more with the generations that are coming on board, and just being able to communicate that I can't tell you how many companies that I work with where people are staying because of the culture. People are coming back because of the culture. It's got nothing to do with the pay, right? They know that they're 20% lower paid, but you know what? This is the company I want to work for. This is the same set of values. This is the impact on society that I want to be able to have in my life.
Yeah, I appreciate you talking about the values of the company as well, because sometimes culture, if it's equated to we need to have a remote social happy hour, great. You may want to have those because that is a good way to blow off steam or whatnot. But I see companies being, here are our values. Here's how we're kind of preaching those values to our organization. Here's how we're recognizing and rewarding people that demonstrate those values, being very proactive and instilling culture in their organization, recognizing where that culture is playing out in the organization. Go on the offensive with respect, not like offending people, but being positive, going on the offensive, reinforcing culture wherever you can, because that does drive the desire to be part of something that aligns with your values, that aligns with your vision of what you want to contribute to the community.
Yeah, and Ivana just posted in the Q&A that her takeaway things that would communicate to the company intentionally considering and trying to improve are things like soft skills and sharing and communicating values to employees, getting them all involved in the goals of the company. There's a great book, The Great Game of Business, that talks about the power of actually getting your employees engaged into the business. So I think it does a pretty good job of making that making the case for having your people involved. Thanks, Alana.
I see Jose has shown back up, so he's probably trying to shut us down, though.
That is correct. So you read my mind, and so a very passionate topic, and I think that there's a lot for all those who attended that they were able to get out from this presentation. So I would like at this moment, to thank you and Don for this informative discussion. And of course, I want to thank everybody that attended today's event. I would also like to remind you that today's event was recorded and you will be able to view it in a couple of days. And be sure to bookmark CSIA event calendar such that you don't miss any opportunities. These are the next 4 ones. And one last thing, be sure to check your spam folder for any CSIA emails you may have missed. Even better, whitelist CSIA so you can stay up to date with what we have. And this concludes our program for today. Once again, thank you for joining and have a great day.